This episode is When We Don't Know What We Don't Know, a diagnostic discussion. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to have you join us for this episode. Tracy, tell our fine audience why they need to listen to this conversation.
Hey, everybody. You may remember a few episodes back, we recorded a segment called The Tech Includes the Humans. And this is part 2 of our discussion, which we promised at the time. And it gets into exactly why digital transformation gets stuck and what we're doing about it and our framework for understanding how to get it unstuck. This is also an episode where we dig into our own philosophies around change, and we do respond to some of the discussions we've been having and unpick some of the difference between the small and large contexts in which digital transformation happens. Also, for our friends, I think we've shouted out to no less than 10 of our friends, so if you hear your name here, please don't be surprised.
Hey, Tracy.
Hey, Tim. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm fine. This week has been kind of bonkers, but I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine.
Tell us about the week. What's bonkers? Does anybody else say bonkers? I feel like we want to hear from any listeners who have said bonkers in 2022. Actually, sorry, in this decade, anytime in 2020.
First of all, I wholly own that I feel like the best period of my life was circa 1975 through 1980-ish, so all my references come from that era. So like bonkers and far out, man. Like you might as well just put a Cheech and Chong record on constant replay in my life.
Okay, so did people say that makes a bundle of sense back then?
No, that's totally I made that up.
That's like 1917. No, that's agricultural,
No, that's
Midwest,
a Tracyism. That is a
basket.
trademark Tracyism. It is.
Yeah.
Bundle of sense. I've also started using different words for real things. So our family doesn't actually use the word windmill anymore, even though we have many of them on the hills outside of Livermore. They now use the appropriate word that Tracy invented, and that is hoobly boobly, which better conveys the motion of the device than just using windmill. So stuff like that.
I would not buy in on that one at all.
Goes the can of worms.
All right, cool. This week was interesting.
Yeah, you.
Okay, on the personal front, our dog got surgery.
I know.
And I'm Montanan.
Yep.
I come from ranch roots. You don't do surgeries on dogs. Like that's
this is 2022. You actually do.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's just like, anyway, for like this is a clear act of love for my wife and dog, but more for my wife, but also like a clear act of survival, because I don't want to have to find a new place to live if I had said no to that. So let's be clear, it was like also motivated by self-interest, but he's doing great. He is hobbling around. It's like the equivalent of like an ACL, they shaved half his leg, and he is not socially savvy enough to be humiliated by that fact. Our other dog was, but little dude's just like too derpy and happy about life. Yeah. So
he's such a in the moment animal.
He is such an in the moment animal.
I love him so much for that.
That is the perfect way to say it. Every moment is the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's just like, I'm here now. I don't know what happened before this, but I'm here now.
And and no thought to what's next. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll tell everybody I'm going to be probably a little looser today than I usually am, because the other thing that happened for me this week is I got COVID shot number 4. And Amy and I were talking about this last night because we both have immunological reasons for this that are real. But I was like, I had to like black out yesterday after like half a day. I was just like, I have to go to bed, and I've determined that science hates me is what is true. Because I mean, I will gladly go get COVID shot number 5 in the fall, but these things wipe me out for like a full day. So, and then they kind of make me all fuzzy, and then I'm like, prone to saying things I, have learned to try and filter or make the attempt at filtering through the years.
Oh dear
I don't
Lord,
know.
that's terrifying.
Yeah.
As your podcast peer on, and co-host, you being looser than usual
Yeah.
is
Woo!
going to be, yeah, here we go. Here we go.
So,
Okay, so this was a fun week for you and I. We got to do
yeah.
quite a few interesting things together. So one was we did a diagnostic review, which we're going to be talking about what the diagnostic is, but we got to do that with a client together this week. And that was great. And then the first advisory meeting for Pond,
Yes.
which was so interesting to meet the other advisors who are just like amazing individuals.
Yeah.
And so incredibly fun to be on that board. Yeah.
I like, first of all, we love Pond. So for folks who are listening, joinpond.com. Tim and I are both on the advisory, and I have to tell you, from where I sit in this world, I am very used to walking into a room and within minutes being like, okay, this is my room. I will act accordingly, or I will just sort of sit back in my like little sort of black trench coat in the back corner and quietly sip a soda while everybody else does things and observe, right? Those are my two modalities. That advisory board meeting was one of the times where I was just personally like, y'all are scary smart. Y'all are terrifyingly experienced. Like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, what value am I bringing? You people are like, those folks are so cool, and I am so excited for working with them. I can't stop gushing. So there you go.
Yeah.
And we just set up the advisory board Slack today, so that was fun too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was so impressed by how personal and real people on that board are. So yeah, we are both really excited about Pond. Expect us to continue to talk about that. If we, I mean, obviously we're excited about it because we are on the board and choosing to be around for that. So, and then recording, We Are for Good.
Yep.
We were on that podcast together yesterday too. Really, really fun. I feel like we did just client meetings this week were really fun.
Yeah.
And so
client work,
I gotta say it
is
what we do, man. What we get to do is just really, really amazing and really fun, including being friends, working together, podcasting together, all of that. So anyway, it's a good week. I also, this was not with you, but I also got to speak to a group of executive directors from Montana Nonprofit Association about crypto and why to receive crypto donations. And that was one of the more fun talks I've given in a really long time, partly because I was so open about what I don't know about it. And so it made it really fun. And in a good conversation. So
in some ways, what's going on with crypto and Web 3.0 reminds me so much of what was going on when HTML hit like the 1.1 or the 1.3 release in the late 90s, and everybody was like, you need a web page, and people are like, why? And it was like, because you need it, and the use case will evolve. You just need to get the thing first, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of where we are in the industry as crypto. And I think, honestly, what I would say to the folks who run apps, who listen to this particular recording is, look, there are becoming more and more legitimate means by which your online donation platforms can accept cryptocurrency. Please go investigate them. This is going to be incredibly important for the nonprofit ecosystem. And by virtue of your investigations, you will help move that needle forward and legitimize this as a tool and not a fascination, which I think is an important distinction.
Well, and also you don't even need to know anything about it to just go to every.org. And this is the
Yes.
first thing I said. Like, I'm going to skip to the end and save you a bunch of confusion. If you don't want to listen in, if you don't like, if this is not a core part of your strategy, then just go to every.org, sign up for their widget, and like, then you can at least be like, yep, we accept crypto, on to the next thing. Your board is happy, your donors are happy, and that's fine. And even if you want to learn more in the future, start there, do
Yep.
that, do that process, start accepting, and then 6 months, a year from now, if it gets more advanced, it gets more advanced. And so yeah, it was fun. In fact, I put a pro con list together for it, and I think it's very pro, but there are some things to be aware on it. And so we can make that part of the show notes,
I think
so
so.
people can
Like,
download that. So
folks
yeah, it's
know,
just a quick
or
PDF.
I've mentioned this before on recordings, but I'm midway through my project of can Tracy mint an NFT. Uh,
Interesting.
and
I
and
figured about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a multi-step process. And it requires connecting things kind of manually that you would expect to be connected automatically based on behavior of other tools on the internet, but that's just not where things are at yet. So maybe in the future, once I actually mint my first NFT, which I'm getting very close to, I just need to read, because the implications of what you're signing up for are kind of interesting. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like before I put money on this,
Yeah.
what is the implication of what I'm doing? But I want to report back on that, because this is a way that we take ownership of things in a new framework, and I think that's the nature of the experiment. um
Yeah. I
you know
think that's right. And that gets into blockchain versus cryptocurrency, which
yep,
is, it's not just fintech. So anyway, it was
exactly.
great. And it was really fun to put out the episode with Justin Edelstein around
Oh yeah,
unblocking
I
blockchain.
love
So
Justin.
I do too.
I
Yeah,
miss Cloud Focus Weekly. That
I do
was,
too. That
for
was
a
an
long
amazing,
time, that
amazing
podcast
break.
was
Yeah.
so fun.
Right. Yeah.
So Justin and Jason and Larry, because I know, Larry, you were sort of the silent partner on that, but Justin and Jason, man, anytime you want to resurrect Cloud Focus Weekly, even just for one episode, it could be like, Cloud Focus, hey, we're back. Like,
Yeah.
that was
Right.
so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Cool. Okay. So on to what we are talking about this week, which has been a great week. We're talking, I think this episode might be called When We Don't Know What We Don't Know. And I want to
I'm going to
start
shorten that
talking.
to unknown unknowns, but
Don't you even start with me on known unknowns, unknown
yeah,
knowns, quadrant craziness, like
no,
whatever.
I mean, the poly scientist in me is like,
Okay.
why can't
You
we just
can,
call it unknown unknowns?
because I already named it for one thing, um,
This is
which
how
is
Why It
we
Matters
don't
got its
know
name,
what
by
we
the way.
don't know. Okay, so you can call it what you want, but Giancarlo, is when we don't know what we don't know, and I'm talking about everybody. And what came into sharp focus this week
Yeah.
was I got fed up with something, and I'm so tempted to spin this as I was brilliant, but I wasn't. And Susan Tobes called me out like right away on it. Was like, with a hey, are
Oh,
you
this is your
why
LinkedIn
is this so
post.
yeah, exactly, why
Yeah.
are you so down on this? And Susan, if you're listening, totally appreciate that post. And I went back and read it. I was like, yeah, I do kind of sound like a teenager here, petulant or whatever. But what I put a post up that just said, that it's a poll, which I haven't done a lot of polls, because I've the few I've done have gotten like 4 results, and it's sort of humiliating. So but I put this one up I put this one up there, and I was like, maybe I'll get 10 or something. Didn't know what to expect, but I just said, who's responsible for the general lack of digital transformation in the nonprofit sector? And then I just made 4 options, which is all you can do, because I would have made more. But so I put nonprofit leaders / boards, fundraisers / philanthropy, tech platforms / consultants, and then the last question is, what's digital transformation?
Yeah.
So we have it now has 66 votes. There are 4 days left. It will be closed by the time anybody hears this, but we would still love to know what you would have voted for on it. And so here's the breakdown. Nonprofit leaderships and boards currently have 62% of votes. Fundraisers and philanthropy have 30. Somebody finally put down tech platforms and consultants. There are 2 of those. And then the last one, there are 3 votes for what's digital transformation. And then the comments are just
Yeah,
really intriguing.
super
Um,
golden comments.
and in and when people started taking it seriously, and I think Tim Sarantonio like was like, hey, there's no nuance in this. And I think so. Lesson number 1, blame is an act of removing nuance. Like what you're trying to do is just blame somebody, and so nuance actually gets in the way of blaming.
Nuance
And
gets in the way of
this
blame.
is absolutely a blaming and very much an unfair poll. Like I'll just own that right away. Like um so first off, like, and Tim Sarantonio then said he wasn't voting for a particular reason, and then cited Amy Sample Ward, who came in and I think, like, for very good reason,
Brought the
like,
hammer down.
they did, and they did it by pointing out that that the digital transformation part of this is societal investment, which is government
Yeah.
spending, basically. And I was like, oh well, there's funders and philanthropy, and he was like, nope, top 15 foundations, could not cover this gap, and here's the Council of Nonprofit data to support that. And I was like, okay, you win, fine.
Well,
So
Tim,
thanks, Tim
the thing
Sarantonio, that was
is,
great.
yeah, well, I mean, thanks to Tim Sarantonio and thanks to Amy Sample Ward, because, like, here's the thing, that gap is billions of dollars.
I know you say this all the
You know?
time, and I gotta say, like, I think in different ways, I think larger, or I think large, like I can scale out and in, but it's in a different range than you and Tim and Amy. I want to be really clear about that, because it's not my instincts, but it is yours. And you've said that multiple times. This is a $5 billion problem.
Yeah,
You
at
know?
minimum. At minimum. And what
Yeah.
kills me, what really kills me, like, I'll be honest and say I responded with, like, oh, philanthropy is totally the problem here. But not, I don't think, well, there are 2 things. One is I responded from that way because of Amy's answer, which is philanthropy perpetuates system of powers and injustice, even if it does so accidentally, by playing into the framework that charity in the first place should be under resourced based on, we were talking about on the We Are for Good thing, the Protestant work ethic, right? Which is just systems of power and privilege that have matriculated through our society, for 400 years. And the fallacy of that thinking is thinking that, we shouldn't have a society that actually looks at a safety net through an equity lens, and that is the job of, not the government and not rich people, to jump in on. And I'm very well to do off, and I think anything that pays fair share is important, because there was times in my life when I wasn't, and I needed that. And you don't know when that circle will close itself on you. You really don't.
Yeah, and I do. That is the thing that is not, like, I don't disagree with all of that, and I'm still also like, okay, but we are where we're at. What's next? Without at the same point being like, those are also important
Mm.
issues, and I'm not trying to say that they aren't, but I am saying, like, okay, yes, but digital transformation for nonprofits does exist right now, no matter how we got here, and what's next that's doable right now in that. And I know I'm opening myself up to saying, like, I'm not paying attention to the wider conversation. I have been for a long time, but it isn't the point of my work on this. My point on the work is, like, there are actual things that we need to start doing for nonprofits in the moment that they're in, which is digitally confused right now, and needing more digital literacy, more funding around this, and better software for it. And so my answer on that was actually it ended up being what's digital transformation. And the reason I put it there is that I think the only way forward is to get at that question with services that aren't just building the tech, but are building the human stack, right? That are around digital literacy. And right now, those services, where they exist, are not precise. They are like, there's a lot of warble around it. The way that I think there was in early software development that became aligned around methodologies. And that's why I just say, until we have a digital transformation methodology, the industry is not prepared to know what digital transformation is in a way that it can deliver. So I think all the rest of it does look like nonprofits are responsible. It does look like philanthropy is like not doing stuff. And it does also look like, to me, like consultants are ignoring the real issues around usage and utilization of the technology that they're providing or that they're implementing. But all of it boils back to, okay, but nobody asked tech platforms to do more than build a tool. And there isn't enough tangible, here is what it looks like, to really hang your hat on for funders. And then of course, take out all professional development, and you've got
Yeah.
nonprofits that, so all of that to say, like, there isn't one answer to this, but I do think there's no one party to blame. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be clear about that. Like, that's an unfair assessment. All of you that answered, like, that's an unfair question. Absolutely it is. But I also want to point out that blame is currently happening. And so I actually like that this just exposed it. It was like, then if that's the way it is, then let's not blame, and let's start saying, like, what is the core issue? And I would say, until we identify services around digital transformation, like, that's where we're going to be stuck.
Well, I mean, I would actually say 3 things, maybe 4. Thing number 1 is, what I thought was funny about that poll was tonally, like, yeah, you're usually the more like softer one on LinkedIn. Like, I'm usually the one on LinkedIn. It's like, here, read this, morons, read it. Like, that's kind of how I am.
Is understated.
Yeah, it's just like, you don't really, you don't need to say it, because I'm just like, read this, or like, live in 1922, so, it's people expect that from me. So tonally, like, people are like, okay, whatever. This is like obviously something Tracy wants me to look at. I'll look at it and just ignore, their own sort of like dismay and disappointment with like society at large. So I think that was funny. I think if I had put that poll out, people wouldn't have even registered, because it would have just been like, oh, it's just Tracy being Tracy. They're just trying to be provocative. But, that was a good utilization of provocation, I thought. Secondly, what I would say is, to your point, this is a both and, right? We have to focus on the things that we know we can change, but we can't lose sight of they're rested in systems of social power and social privilege, and frankly, public policy, that shape outcomes in ways that even the best intentions can't always overcome, right? And, that's been the history of movement organizing in some ways, is how to overcome those systems and make real change. So I would say it's a both and. I would say this kind of work that you're talking about, which I know we're going to pivot to in a moment, needs to be rested in a better consciousness of those systems of power and privilege. And that gets right to the heart of what Amy was saying on that. And, so, you're right. Like, this is not a, like, everybody's wrong. It's like, we're all looking for answers, right? And we're all looking for answers with the skills and the capabilities and the insights that we've had, because we all know change is needed. And I think lastly, what I would say is, it was just really funny, like, watching Tim be the center of controversy on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, I'm getting my popcorn and I'm just sitting back and I'm watching this, because, it's just a fun little way to point out that we all want to do better,
Well, and it didn't go like there was no trolling, and this is
Yeah.
what I
Oh,
really
no.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Like people showed up to say what they thought, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. And I didn't mean to be throwing out a jab or anything with the question. I actually feel like it is a question that's been bugging me for a long time, and like I said, I just want to know what people thought, and I got it. It was great,
Yeah. That was
and
a
I hope
really
the
great
conversation
discussion.
keeps going. And I also don't like I was not a ringleader on that one. I think that I think a lot of stuff emerged. And I want to let's thank Kevin Bromer for coming out,
Oh,
because we haven't heard
right.
from him in a minute. And I think what I loved about his response, which was like it took so much area, it was like 3 comments, but it boiled down to at the end of it, like the power of roadmaps.
Yes.
And I
And the
just want to
power of vision and strategy. Yes.
double
Yes.
underline that. And well, I think he wasn't saying, I mean, yes, it does require strategy, but what he kept saying is a simple one's all you need. It doesn't need to be big. You don't need you don't need a weekend retreat to pull it out. Like just a, just that would be enough. And so okay, so let's get into it. I think that's
I will say the way that Kevin wrote that though, like I so appreciate it,
I
because
know.
I'm usually the
Yeah.
one, and I've made this reference on other recordings. I'm usually the one who's like, I'm going to open the tone of verbose arcane knowledge and just keep going until I run out of character spaces, and then keep going. And I was like, oh, Kevin, I love you. Like I was
Yeah,
like, yes, yeah,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
you're right. Like we don't need to lock ourselves in a room for 4 days and come up with like the perfect. What we need to do is have a compass and know that we're going in a direction.
Yeah. Totally.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. We yep, I think that's great. That makes me wonder, and I may actually reach out and ask Leon Wilson, like, hey, like scan this. And then as kind of the historian around this, I
Oh.
would love to know what
And
Leon's
Sam
thinking.
Kaplan, by the way, over at Submittable,
Yeah.
just did a podcast with Leon as well. And if folks
Yeah.
haven't dug in on that, go
Yeah.
do it. I have
Yeah.
such mad respect for Leon
Yeah.
and Sam both, actually, but
Mhm.
Leon's got a perspective on our industry that is rich, informed, accurate, and just spot on amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so all of that is to like that's a long, very long-winded way of saying what like we're in a moment where I believe the best way to describe it is to say we like we the collective, we the industry don't know what we don't know right now about digital transformation for nonprofits, and all the work in the last decade that's been done by like Deloitte and Kinsen and McKinsey and like all of that work rests on and a kind of this bedrock assumption of professional development that doesn't exist here. And so the whatever models have been emerging for the for-profit business are not applying for whatever reason. I'm putting out an assumption that I think that it's because
Yeah, the
of
hyper
the
nuanced Tracy
right.
just wants to jump in on all over this, but
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
going to
don't
let
do
you
that.
keep going.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And so, you know, I'll also say because I have invested so much thought and thinking into this for the last year, I also want to be clear. Like, I do feel like there are answers. I feel like I've got some of them, and I don't think I'm the only one. And
Yeah.
to Susan Tobes's point, if you're listening to this, I don't think that we're doing it all wrong, and I don't think that everybody's wrong, but I do think we haven't asked those questions the right way in some ways, collectively. And and some of that's impressionism, and some of that's probably just not being aware of what else is going on in the industry, which I'm sure is happening. It's a really vast industry. And Billy Bickett actually just sent over this week some really interesting stuff that's happening in the UK around this. So I want to be
and
clear.
he's
Like, we've got some
upcoming
answers,
for Why It Matters.
yeah, I can't wait.
Billy's an incredibly smart human being. We can't wait to have him here. And yeah, his work is definitely a new angle.
So all of that said, and yes, I agree, cannot wait to have Billy Bigot on here. But all that said, what I want to do is break down what we've learned from the diagnostic as an introductory tool for us to just learn from our own experience, having done this now. For I think we put the diagnostic out, and we've been working towards it for a while, but we put the diagnostic out in December. We've gotten quite a few answers. Would love more. So if you want to go to diagnostic.nowitmatters.com and just take a quick 6-question quiz on digital health for your nonprofit, please do. And it doesn't have to be a nonprofit, just for your business. What like we'd love to see more and more of that come in. But what on the other side of that, there is a paid review, and we've done that now for enough clients where I feel like, okay, patterns are starting to emerge that are quite interesting. And we're not going to be, of course, naming clients or anything like that, but the things that are coming up from them are the point of conversation, and what not what we've told them about their organizations, which have been helpful, but really more what are we learning about what this means for digital transformation. So
Yeah.
okay, so to dive into that, I think that like the first thing to say is those 6 questions form 6 uh, 6 vital signs, 3 of which are human stack and 3 of which are tech stack. And the overall point of the diagnostic is to put on one axis what's going on the human stack, and on the other what's going on in the tech stack. And the idea there being, if you can identify where you're at in these 2 areas, and then with the 6 vitals under them, you can essentially almost form like, I don't know, like a personality profile for an organization's use of technology, both
Yep.
on their behavior on the human stack and their and their solutions on the tech stack.
I think what I'll add to this is, Tim and I have been working together for 2 years. And, when I started working with you, Tim, I took a sort of like pickup truck's worth of like notes and drawings and frameworks that I've been noodling on to explain this phenomenon. And I was just like, here, nobody's wanted to do anything with this. Here you go. And, Tim and I each have different forms of magic. And I really want to call out that this is your magic. Like, I have different magic. I can do different things with technology and business owners and
Yeah, to the
partnerships
point
and
about
so forth.
you and
You
Tim
know,
Serantonio and Amy Sample Ward, like
yeah.
that, I agree with. Yeah.
So I have different magic than Tim, but this really is like, I couldn't get here in a way that this does get here. And this is after, first legal pads and then digital pads of countless frameworks and diagrams and like A to B lists and relationship lists. And so what I want to point out is the simplicity of this is the point. And it's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah, thanks for that. And the the goal was to create something that my mom could take and understand. Not that she works for an organization that uses this, but if she did, I would want it to be aimed at her level of sophistication. And so the language on it is really plain. And I always make that point because it feels so intellectually light or
Yeah.
something like. So my background's in econometrics. I want to get in here and start thinking about things like heteroscedasticity and should this be run on logarithmic.
You can't say that word on this podcast.
And
that's a dirty word.
And all of that. And so part of what I had to give up is that you don't need a sample of 30 people.
Yeah.
You don't, just to even hit like statistical significance. That's not the point of it. In fact, I have taken this with like as we saw on the We Are for Good podcast. I just took the answers from Becky, no comments, nothing else about that, and just like said, "Hey, here you go. Does this look anything like what you're experiencing?" And it did. And I think that that's part of what's interesting, and it goes back to part of what we say about the human stack, which is like the human stack is full of incredible processors, and intuition is one of the advantages of the human stack that doesn't exist necessarily in the tech stack. And so I feel like you can rely on that human intuition, and just even if you've got a sample of one, say, hey, this is kind of what I'm reading from that. But as you and I saw when we had when we were working with with the one that we got this week that had over 30 answers in it, like it also crystallized a lot of other pieces to it. So we've done some with a few, some with more, and the answers really do, like, you can fill out a picture in a different way, but you don't. I think my point on that is I agree with you on the simplicity, that you're just trying to get the shape of it.
Yeah. And what you do next is what you do next, right? Like, I've done strategy papers for a myriad of organizations. And when I do something like that, I'm generally like, okay, here you go, take it or leave it. But like, not for nothing, I've been kind of noodling around this world for 20 years. So I know a little bit of something, and here's my perspective. And sometimes those things just get immediately shelved because people don't want actual action. They want information, and they want that information to align with their thinking. And when it doesn't, I've noticed that's when these things get shelved. And the difference here is, in all of the instances where we've done these, it didn't get shelved because instead of giving folks sort of an outside in looking strategy piece, what it did is reflect back to these organizations their own thinking about themselves. And that's really critical for creating a benchmark for how your organization's going to operate if what your next step is a tech transformation.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, I think that's really well said. And the what I've liked about this process as we've done it, and I remember when we first started, I remember you were like, because this feels like discovery.
It does.
And we've done, like, all of us, have learned to trust the conversation that we're having with clients to get to, like, and so you train your ears to listen really well and to ask really pesky questions and all of that. So I remember it took multiple conversations for you to see what I'm doing is actually saying, I am trying not to hear from the client. What I'm trying to do is hear from results that they have, some comments that they're making, no interaction between us. And then we want to show them their results without us in dialogue with them.
Yeah.
And the point of that
Right.
is to say, like, what we are trying to get at here is a picture of your answers in an analysis that we're providing, that does have a simple framework with some very simple math behind it, but it actually does reveal, in my opinion, we get just as far when I look at one of the results on this for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I feel like I get just as far as when I would go in and do this for 30 to 50 hours of analysis with a client. That's been really surprising. Now, what we don't get at is the roadmap on solution fit. So I want to be really clear that what we were doing before was to say, on one of the, like, one of the vitals is the fit, the actual solution, your tech stack. Like, how well does it fit? That used to be the entire conversation. And so we would spend all of it on that. And what I'm trying to do is actually, in some ways, say the rest of the industry has that, and we can get at it But if you just have a sense of where that's at, and then you move on to the other 5 vitals, what's next? And part of that is an emerging philosophy for me around digital transformation. And I think, for both of us, so I'm saying mine, but I think, this has been through the work at Now It Matters Together, has been that the key here is to stop just reactively moving nonprofits out of existing systems, and instead start in the systems that they're in. Start with existing systems. And that's a real reversal on the work that we did for, a decade.
Yeah. And got really good at.
Very good at
really
it.
good at. And I think
Absolutely.
that's not a slight, by the way. What I want to call out is the power of that perspective. And that is, yes, a change may be warranted, but have you investigated where you are first? And, one of the things that I've spent some time explaining to application developers and to some degree platforms is the power of that retention that this enforces, right? And the power of retention is, equally as important as the power of sales. And the problems that are engendered in these discussions is that the underlying assumption is that change is necessary always. And that actually isn't true. And we've constructed an entire economy of selling to nonprofits in the impact economy around change being necessary because technology is evolving. But if we take a step back and understand that the power of retention is equally important, that economy will still grow and you will still make money.
Well, yes. And I think the reason that the human stack is so important is because without it, you either are changing the tech stack or you aren't. And that is where
it takes the binary out of that decision.
If you say, okay, there's a human stack, and you say that is its own thing to change, then what you introduce is you can still do the change that needs to happen, but you don't have to change the technology. And that does 2 things. One, it aligns, it decreases change saturation. And I would just say, that's a real thing. Humans can only handle so much change at a time. And so if you replace a whole system first, and you haven't implemented a way that the tech stack actually works cohesively, you actually stress out the human stack without realizing it, because you're introducing a lot of change. So even if, and this is the second thing, even if it's time to change the tech stack, that's not necessarily the best starting point.
Yes.
The best starting point is still, the human stack. And that doesn't need to be forever. That could just be a couple of months. But if you introduce a framework of change first, and I know that this is called change management, the problem is that change management has been conceptualized as part of this either out there thing, or it's a disconnected kind of version of the tech stack or the human stack, without identifying a methodology around that is more holistic. And it's often just associated with change management of the existing system that you're working in. So if you're doing a CRM, cutover, change management is change management of the people in that CRM. And we're talking about the human stack. It is, how does your organization collectively use all of its digital systems together? Those are that gets it out of just this one project. So change management is so often tied to this project we need to do, instead of our organization collectively needs to use all technologies together. And that doesn't mean that they're all interoperable. In fact, they aren't. And that's the thing that I feel like we've bounced around with for so long, is these are not going to get interoperable tomorrow. And so we need to figure out how we're going to work together on them.
Even if folks like myself are desperately pushing for that in the field and in the ecosystem,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So I realize we're we're getting high level here. Just to explain the framework really quickly then. There's solution on the tech stack. There are three vitals: solution fit, and solution fit is basically tech stack. There's data quality and there's utilization. And the idea here is, I think I instinctively, when we started this, was like, okay, what we need to test for is things like change management, governance, adoption, right? Because those are the big ones. But the more we dug into that, the more we realized like adoption is a system and an outcome. It's a thing that happens when other things are in place. Same thing with governance, and even change management to some degree, which I think you can't get at those as directly as I think we have thought in the past, and instead those are things that happen when you put other actions in place. So
Yeah.
the point of the vitals is what things are there, what are the input things that you can actually do something with. So
I think also what's important to point out about the utilization metric is that unlike adoption, which I think really is centered on a binary kind of input, like are you using it, are you not, for how long are you using it, my impression of utilization, and I would love to hear you unpick this a little bit, is not so much are you using it as how much value are you getting out of your use of it. Because I log into some tools once a day, once every 3 days, but so it won't look like I'm adopting it very well. But for the one thing that I need to get out of them when I log into it, I'm like, it's here. Cool. I got value out of this. That's exactly what I needed in the moment I needed it. That to me is the difference between adoption and utilization. It's how much value are you getting out of this? And why do you perceive yourself as getting value out of it?
yeah, and so absolutely agree. The other thing I would say on it is I'm very suspicious of standard operating procedures like SOPs. That said, and a lot of this is because I'm not like the guy that reads the instructions, or I didn't used to be, and I'm a bit embarrassed to tell you that I am now. I'm like becoming the dude that I know. That's gonna fundamentally change your opinion of me, and I'm sorry
No,
for
I'm
that.
just gonna hold on to that
But
for a future recording.
right, I know it's gonna come out. I know it's gonna come back to me. But the more I've watched like really, really excellent like clients that have taken our framework and have done so much with it, what I recognize is that they have put to use things like standard operating procedures. Sometimes they don't even call them that, but they've actually created such great operating procedures around that. And so some of the utilization is, okay, do you as an organization even know what you're supposed to be doing in the system? And then are users doing that? And the other part of the vitals was looking for some of the key indicators that you can make decisions when compared to other things. So, in the case of looking at We Are for Good, one of the things that was really interesting was that they had such a strong solution fit, which we're often like if we're working with clients a lot of times because they have a low solution fit. Like that's one of the reasons that they're coming to us. So strong solution fit with middle data quality and middle utilization. That's a very different profile and says something very different than like an organization that would have high solution fit, high data quality, and almost no utilization, which we saw from another client. And we were like, okay, this means that they have somebody in there that is doing it all. And a lot of them are just doing stuff on paper and then like shoving it over to somebody that is doing a lot of data entry or doing maybe better, like some imports, and people are doing stuff in Excel, which is which turned out to be the case. And so I think that the point here is that these vitals aren't independently important. They are, but they together they start to form a picture about what's going on. So those are the three tech stack vitals: solution fit, data quality, and utilization. And then on the human stack side, we have system sustainability. And system sustainability is is your system getting a little bit better or worse over time? And I can't remember precisely the way that we asked that question, but this is not around organizational sustainability. This is around when you look at your digital systems, like, do you feel like we're trending towards it getting better, or are you trending towards it's like falling apart? And people often have very clear, like if you frame it that way, that people usually fall on one side or the other. Sometimes they're kind of in the middle, but that one usually helps. And then digital strategy, which really is about like, do you feel like where you're headed as an organization around your technology and around your systems?
And
then
by the way, like
oh,
that digital strategy thing, that gets to the heart of our discussion earlier regarding, Kevin Bromer's comments, right?
absolutely
Like,
does. Yep.
I grew up in the era of tech where things were slower and more predictable. So my digital strategy was hardware replacement cycles and things that we don't really consider anymore to be strategic, but just operational. But back 20, 30 years ago, they were strategic, right? Like thinking about that was strategic. So that gets to the heart of some of Kevin's comments. It doesn't need to be over gilded. I think that lily
Yep.
doesn't need to be gilded very much.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. I want to come back to the who does what on these when we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about them. Um, but you are correct, and so is Kevin, that like, hey, a sense of direction is is key. A sense of direction that is written down and other people can see and create visual expectations for, um, is like 1,000 times, like you get 1,000 yards for that one shift in is written down, people can see it. And so even if someone knows kind of where they think things are going, as soon as you put that in a form that people can look at and start to hang their hat on, that becomes exponentially more valuable. The other thing we haven't really talked about, and this is where digital strategy is one of the first ones that creates a big pull on this, is what happens on the edges of that. So the low side of digital strategy is reactive, and
Yes.
the high side of digital strategy is strategic. And so, and one of the really interesting things is, almost immediately what I look for is, where is their sustainability and where is their digital strategy? And I don't even care somewhat if they're both low or if they're both middle or high. But when I see one that's in one direction and the other that's in the other direction, then that is where we find some of the, in some ways, the easiest things to fix, because there's something you can do about it. But like a lot of times what you see is, like high digital high digital strategy, almost over strategizing, and low system sustainability. And a lot of times what you see in that is a strategic leader, a strategic thinker like me, who is in tactical meetings and changing my mind every 10 minutes, right? Like, you've worked with me, and you and I have very similar personalities. Like, we should not be running tactical meetings,
No,
Tracy. You and I should not be running tactical meetings, because we shiny object syndrome is not just like a theme for us. It is like a way of life that we've parked in. And that's really important on the strategy side. But if you over strategize on that, what happens is that you create unsustainable expectations. You can't introduce any accountability. And then you're focused on like re-road mapping and getting that thing dialed in, instead of just like the simple things of like data quality and, like fixing the issues that users are actually raising. So
no, I think that's right. I mean, what's funny is it's not like we can't do tactical things. It's just that we need to see that tactic connected to something in a way that I think purely tactical people don't. Like, they're like, okay, you tell me to lick 1,000 envelopes and mail them out? Sure, no problem. And you and I are always the people who are like, yeah, no problem. We'll lick 1,000 envelopes, but why? Like, what's the goal here? You know, like, is the
I'm
goal
not
to
sure
get,
that's where I'm
you
at.
know,
I feel like
you know,
within 10 minutes, I'd be like, okay, how can you get a robot to do this? And like, well, what I'd say on this is we absolutely see, and I fall into this trap all the time. I understand how important the tactics are.
yeah,
Like I see the value of them and I value them so much. Like I am often envious of people that can just go do the maintenance stuff. And it's constantly ripping my life apart in all sorts of ways that I can find zero routine. It's just part of how I'm shaped and what I struggle with. And so when and I've noticed this too, when you and I are working with someone who is just same thing every day, does the tortoise part of living and the tortoise part of tactics really really well. Like I have so much mad respect for that, and that is the key to strong digital transformation, is to treat it like tortoise, not hair work. Like you have to dial it back to so boring that you and I cannot handle it. And that's a lot of transformation work, is really slow and methodical on the human stack side.
I'm thinking of
um,
every executive team meeting with Yumi and Rachel.
Oh my gosh. Yes, and yes,
You
yes,
know,
we should just say thank you,
yeah,
Rachel, for all of that participation, and how many times you must have gone on mute and done push-ups.
yeah.
So,
Also,
um,
thank you for making us both better and more conscientious managers and better and more conscientious thinkers about our work, because it's really easy for people to be blind to their own impact. And, you know, this is a whole nother recording, and frankly we
yeah, it
should have
is.
Rachel on, but
We should.
you
Yeah.
know, being a conscientious, it's okay to be you. Be conscientious about that impact of how you as a manager are spinning up your team. Like, that was a huge impact on our executive team, and that was amazing.
And for years before that, like this did not start with Rachel.
Yeah,
Like the executive team before that with Angela and Joni and Justin and Jenny, all try,
right.
all
That was
trying
before
to
my
all
era.
try
Right.
exactly, but the same thing. And I feel like, yeah, they have done all of those cast of characters have done so much to be like, hey, this is like, we need you to like leave the room, exit the building while we now
Yeah.
do some of the things you've talked about. So yeah, I think that all that makes sense. The last vital is accountability. And I always say with accountability when we're talking this through is that there are three forms of it. So when we put the accountability like polls up on one side or the other, one side is ignored and the other side is recognized. And the point there is that I think often I was raised thinking of accountability as you get in trouble if you do it wrong. And that is better, that's the middle ground type of accountability, and it's better than the worst form of accountability, which is ignoring. And this is a parenting thing as well. Like the worst thing you can do with humans is to ignore their efforts. And I think that when it comes to digital transformation and the human stack, there's so much confusion around what are we supposed to be doing with it, that leaders don't feel able to know what to recognize and feel mean by policing it. And so the only other option at that point is to move to ignoring it. And that, I don't think that's irrational. And I'm not like, I actually want to say like that makes a bundle of sense, to put it in your words. Um, and so part of what, when we're calling this, when we don't know what we don't know, what happens is that you ignore the misbehaviors around this, and you don't know where to point them. And so and then of course the best form of it is recognizing good work. And so a simple version of that is that when we do our framework, which I think we're going to talk about next, but when we do the framework, one of the things that we look at is how do you make it so that you can complain in less than 30 seconds on the page that you're on. And if users will do that, it is so important to reward that with positive accountability by saying,
Yeah.
thanks for submitting this. We're taking it, we're looking at it. Here's the update on it. Here's what we did with it. And so when accountability is working really well, we're, like we get to a place where we're looking at, this is you're actually making the system better, and you're accountable to the users that are submitting things to you for making the system better. And so that's my last point on all of this, is that part of what we've done together is figure out, how do the dominoes fall,
Yeah.
around this work? How do you act on it? And I feel like if there's magic from me on it, it is looking at the numbers and being able to say, like, I think this is what's going on at a high level with the organization, and then understanding, here is with these 6 vitals, here is the order that we need to approach this on. And so far it's been the same order every time. And I think that that's one of the biggest learnings for us, is that there is a way to work on this. And Kevin, to your point, the absolute first step is a roadmap, is digital strategy, and starting there. And I don't want to say more about that, because I feel like you can't, like, there's more to it. And I would be afraid for people to just like try and execute on these one at a time. That's not how it works. I'm not trying to turn this episode into a sales call, but what I will say is we have the diagnostic review to talk all this through with organizations. It's sliding scale so that smaller organizations can afford it. And what we're able to do in, a 3-hour session with a team around just understanding, here's what it looks like and here's what's next for you, really gets at, here's what we think we know about what you don't know. And that's what a diagnostic is supposed to do. And it doesn't mean that we're not learning more, but I also feel like, we have learned quite a bit about that in this process and in dialing this in.
Well, I would offer 2 things, and then I think that's like the way to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it. But the 2 things I will offer is, one, it's funny you take it to parenting, which is absolutely a skill set that I'm learning. And I've shared on this recording before, I kind of grew up rough. Like, we didn't, without getting into the big story of it, which you can always listen to, because I think I recorded a chunk of it. But, it's taken my mom 85 years to finally say to me quietly over dinner one night, hey, like, your childhood was pretty heinous, huh? um, and, that's all I need from mom, right? But why I'm even saying that is because this is sort of a no judgment, no shame. We're all products of our upbringing kind of process. And it is perfectly natural. And as I'm learning as a parent, perfectly natural to just resort to the shit that works, right? And for some of us, the stuff that we know works isn't healthy for where we want to go. And that's been a huge lesson of parenting. And I think leading organizations through this, as leaders of organizations, as business people, we need to give ourselves that absolution of shame so that we can get to the heart of the matter. And it is so easy to ignore things because our fears, our resentments, our shame, our unwillingness to learn, our, absolute insecurities as individuals will hold us back. But when we dive into it, the other thing I will say is, in all of these works that we've done with these clients, there's profound relief, and that's also true with parenting. Like, you validate the positive and folks are super relieved. They're like, yeah. And if you're able to sort of shamelessly and forthrightly saying, here's the stuff we need to work on, it's actually profoundly relieving. And that has been a common thread that I've observed in all of these engagements, is the profound relief of just discovering what is.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm so glad we're ending on this point.
Yeah.
And it's a really important one, which is that what what we did set out to do was to say, here are some handholds that you should not be shamed about. Like, there's no good, bad here. There's where you're at. And part of what's going on in the human stack is that human behavior is emotionally led, right?
Yep.
And so if you like, but these aren't emotions, and I think that's part of the point. Is what we want to say is, if you start to talk about these things, you can start to get at the emotions that surround them. And when you unwrap those emotions, and you're exactly right, you make it a shame-free place to talk. Like, doesn't like there's no moral failure for being where you're at on these, on, you know, in this these vitals. Like, that's fine. It's where you're at. It becomes such a different conversation. And you can, and also, I think there's a lot of trauma responses around technology. There's a lot of fear.
Yep.
There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of learned helplessness, which and so part of what we're doing is taking, and especially from people who have had the most resistance to technology, that's shrouded in a lot of fear and frustration and social shaming. Like, it's embarrassing to not be good at something. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think a lot of what we are trying to do is say it's fair to be where we're at, and then how do we move forward? And that happens to your point, you know, yesterday on the We Are for Good podcast, of the power of a conversation. And
Yeah.
And I think that what I would say on the review is that when we host the conversation, we can do it in a way that releases a lot of the tension that's existed around this for a long time, because we're a new agent in the conversation, and we can kind of equalize some of that. And that's been really interesting to watch as well.
Yeah. And I absolutely think, by the way, Tim, you know, to our earlier discussion around, like, what's the Tim magic? What's the Tracy magic? You know, is this foreshadowing? I don't know. But I think, you know, based on where you and I are going next, you know, you should absolutely sell this, because this is Tim magic. This is the thing that, you know, I came to rely upon you for as a leader over the past 2 years, and said, okay, like, Tim gets this in a way that I don't. And I get some shit that Tim doesn't get, and that's okay. But if we didn't make an intentional space around understanding and dissecting that, we would have gone bonkers with each other pretty quick. But
I think so.
we created a space where, you know, and through the nudging of all the people we've listed, you know, like, it's like, look, you two come into a room and it's like whatever's happening stops, you know, and we're like, okay, if that's true, then here's how we both have to play our roles and parts in that. And I think this is just another way of saying it's okay to have something that feels like an unnatural motion, but I don't look at my Peloton and wish I were biking on it. I get on my Peloton and I let them validate my feelings. I cry a little bit. I drink water. And no matter how lousy of a day I'm having or how poorly I've done on the leaderboard, it doesn't matter, because when I get off, I feel better. And I think that's the kind of process we need for technology. And that's what this work has culminated in for you.
We're ending right there. That is such a great image of, like, nobody wants to, and yet you feel better after. So
yeah.
And thanks for those nice words.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy. Tim, you've said nice words to me before, and I'm like, leave me alone. You know, so here's some nice words.
I like nice words. I'm not embarrassed. I crave it. Like, yeah, no, tell me good things about myself. I'm not too ashamed to ask for that. So anyway,
thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Our listeners
those
are
of you
amazing.
that listened all the way through.
Yeah.
Like you deserve a t-shirt or something. Not that we have one, but you know, you
not
deserve
yet.
one. So
we're working on just getting better signage right now. But
and we both hope you have it. We hope you have a t-shirt. Put your favorite one on in our honor and say, good job, you, for listening all the way to the end. And we are ending right there.
This is Tracy Kronzak.
And I'm Tim Lockie.
And you've been listening to Why It Matters, an independent production that captures our passions, personalities, and purpose for technology as applied to the impact economy.
All of that's important, but even more important, we are here to have fun and introduce some of the people and ideas that keep us up at night and get us out of bed in the morning.
We are so grateful that you've been listening to us. We have no idea why you'd want to do that. Maybe you lost a bet. Maybe you're stuck in a car with someone else controlling the sound system. Or maybe you are truly interested in what we have to say.
Whatever the reason, whether it's a bet or you're a believer, would you hit subscribe? Or if you've already done that, would you mind leaving us a review? And if you're really brave or want to punish someone, please recommend this podcast to your friends, enemies, and family.
And all kidding aside, thanks for tuning in, and we are so glad that you're here.